They say that when dreams come true, it's a beautiful thing, and that they can come true, and when they do that, it's a beautiful thing. In this game, we have the final round between the young challenger Tomaraju Gukesh from India and the world champion Ding Liren from China. It is winner takes all. Round 14. The score is 6.5, 6.5. If they draw, they go into tie breaks. If not, well, the other side wins then. So a lot of pressure in this game, high stakes. It doesn't get higher than this. Two of the finest players taking each other on for the crown, for the prestigious title of World Chess Champion. If Gukesh wins, he'll be the 18th World Chess Champion at the age of 18. And a fun fact, Gukesh could still enroll in the World Junior Championships because anyone under the age of 20 is eligible for that. If Ding wins, he retains his title and is a two-time world champion. So, without further ado, Ding had the white pieces and the game commenced with f3. So Ding playing the reti, his standard line. Gukesh goes d5. We have g3. We have c5 then by Gukesh. Bishop g2 standard. Knight c6. d4. e6. Castles. And here we have a takes. Most common reply is knight f6. That's how it's standardly dealt with. My Gukesh going for this capture and Ding replying with knight f6 is Gukesh implying one of two things, either to go bishop to c5 to exert more pressure, or um, to go e5 to strike in the center. So, but Gukesh, before all that, decides to go for a knight g to e7, which is really rare. It's not really been played at the top levels before. And the reason why is because you're asking a question, what you're going to do with this knight. And it's also like a similar to a very cozy defense structure, right? But here, knight g7 is asking Ding, what are you going to do? How do you respond to this? Because it's not a direct active threat, for instance, like bishop c5, right? You'd have to move. Definitely, either when e5 is played with bishop c5, you could just go e3. Okay, knight g to e7, sway c4, striking on the flank to attack on d5. Okay, now knight happens. Queen takes, knight to c6. So now we see the reason why knight g to 7 was played to capture on d4 if Ding decided not to, and then to strike with the other knight on c6, simultaneously opening up the dark square bishop to castle. Okay, queen back to d1, and we have d4. We had very similar setups in earlier rounds of this event, where d4 and e5 was seen in game 12 or game 11, where things slipped. Had a potential win in his hands, but he slipped and blundered eventually with queen c8 in that game, where we saw this type of idea in that game with reverse Blumenfeld with b4, d4, and e5. So some similar characteristics from that game where Gukesh had white. And bishop to c5. This is what I mentioned earlier with knight g7 coming to c6 and opening up this line. This is why d4 is also played to add more defense to the d4 thrust. Okay, we have e takes d, bishop takes d, knight to c3 then, and castles. So after 12 moves, we can see both sides have castled the kings into safety. The minors are developed and just still very balanced and equal. Seems like a very quiet game. Knight to b5. The bishop drops back to b6. And here, slight inaccuracy. Here, e5 is just accounted for or advocated for. Because after e5, you'd have takes, e takes, and best move now is b3. After b3, bishop to f5. Maybe eyeing knight b4, knight c2 ideas. Bishop b2. And here, preferably would be queen d7 or rook e8. And the game just goes on. But after knight b5, Gukesh drops back, and yet Ding had a slight chance to capitalize with top move being queen f3. And after bishop d7, just rook d1. putting pressure on the queen on the open file here, open d files. But that did not happen. We have b3, which is also fine. It's allowing the bishop to develop on this long diagonal, which is a beautiful, beautiful diagonal. As you can see, there's not much activity on this diagonal the black has going on, just a pawn there. So I think I get ideas of maybe uh, bishop to b2 and queen g4 ideas, bishop to e4, just potential moves, right? Or sequences in this position that would be really good for him. So b3 and a6, kicking the knight. Knight back to c3 then, and bishop to d4, eyeing this knight as well as the rook. Thinks there's not a problem then. I'll just go bishop e2 as intended with b3 and guard my knight. And this also setting up, opening up for the rook, right? We have e5 then by Gukesh, strongest move. And here queen to d2, preparing the rooks to join the battle, connecting the rooks with queen d2, very important. Here we'd expect the light square bishop to come out as well, and to also Gukesh also trying to do the same by connecting his rooks. We have knight to d5 and now the game starts to clutter a bit seemingly, but it's all good. Gukesh has no problem on going b5, top move here. If you capture as it does, a takes b, and now some of the bigger pieces will be exchanged. Knight to f4 is a nice move. It's the only one that maintains some sort of equality. Any other move, if you say for instance you went knight to c3, attacking there, well, not a problem. Queen b6 stops all the threats there. And then we'd have the knight perhaps go back to d5, and now we do the trades, right? Takes, takes, and thereafter rook f to d8. There's pressure on the bishop, and it's important here. If you just drop back, it might not be the strongest move because after that we'd have rook a to c8. It's important here not to go bishop f2 check thinking you've got a discovery on the queen, because you could just capture with the queen and you are just down a piece then in this end game, and you'd be lost. So knight to f4 then. Um, Capturing e takes f is also fine because you just capture on b6. And this is what ends up happening in the game. If we go back, knight f4, uh, e takes f, bishop takes c, and now you think, okay, there's problems with the rook on a8 here, but Gukesh says, nope, you're going for my rook, I'm going for your rook. So very symmetrical, like, if you look at this position here, you have the rook on f1, the rook on f8, the queen on d2, the queen on d8, the rook on a1, the rook on a8, bishop eyeing this rook on a1, the bishop eyeing this rook on d8. So we see it's most likely going into an opposite color bishop endgame, maybe, maybe not. But definitely one thing is for certain here. One pair of rooks will be removed soon enough. And after rook takes uh, queen takes on b2 and rook takes on queen takes on b2 and rook to b8. We see rook f to d1, then eyeing the queen on d8. Thereafter we have queen to b6 then, asking this bishop, where are you going? The bishop says, nope, I'm just going back to f3, and it's quite equal. We have h takes g, and the only move now, it was logical, you go h captures on g3. Then we have b4 here. And in this position, Ding played a4, and he loses some sort of advantage here. Logically, any move here that we would play is fine to keep equality. Rook to d2, and the reason being we want to connect our rooks. After, let's say, rook b to d8, you just connect your rooks, and it's fine. This is the logical sequence how most players would play and go about it. Even if you wanted to go rook to d4, that's fine. The same thing. Rook b to d8 or rook f to d8. Doesn't matter which rook you're challenging with. You're just developing um, your rook doubling up standard, right? As we auto double your rooks on the open files. And if you trade, you could even trade with the queen there. And you are perfectly fine here. The game is dead equal. After this, you might have rook b8. There's ideas of going bishop to e2 here, g6 and bishop c4. And you trade off, right? And you're just in a drawn endgame here. Because this is what it's pointing to, right? But here, instead of that, Ding played a4, which is still okay, but it's much more technical now, not as straightforward. Objectively at their level, this is dead drawn. But why would you go for something so complex when you could simply just go rook and double up, right? I mean, simpler that way. Plus, Ding was under severe, in a severe time pressure compared to Gukesh when they reached this position. Gukesh had over an hour and Ding in his last 20. So we have B takes A3, Gukesh captures ampersand, and Rook takes on A3. Thereafter, we have G6. And Ding now just wants to trade off queens, and he's arguing he can defend this position. All right. The main problem is that even though they are equal with the pawn count, this is an isolated pawn. And if all the major pieces, the queens and the rooks, queen and the rooks for both sides were removed, we'll see that we have bishops of the same color complex. And this bishop would be eyeing this pawn immediately. King would get into play, and we'd have big problems here. Because this king would end up having to perhaps come and guard this pawn. Because remember, if you place the pawn on a dark square, the light square bishop can't do much at all because it's on a dark square, it can't defend. And the king would have to come in and the white king would have to come in and come defend the pawn on a dark square. If it's on a light square, well, black's got a light square as well, and a king to double attack. And then we'd have a majority running here. Perhaps ideas of h5. Uh, the theme here would be in a 3 versus 2 majority h5, g5, and h4 going for g takes h and g takes h, and we'd have this pass pawn running. Just an example of how tricky it can get. Thing says, okay, let's trade queens again, but this time I'm gonna offer you an appetizer. I'm giving you a pawn, and Gukesh says, okay, fine. This seems to be a dead draw anyway. I'm gonna trade pawns with you, and we're getting ready for the time breaks. So here we have rook a8 again, forcing a trade because you have to. The rook is up and to the queen in this to the king in this position. So trades happen. And now, although Gukesh is up one, there's not much advancement that can be made because, unlike in the previous position, as discussed, no outside pass. There's no outside pawn, uh, outside pass pawn to maybe cause some deflection or distraction on the king to run this way to defend. So this should be a hold, especially with the rook and bishop still on the board. Because in the end, if the rooks are exchanged and it's bishop and 3 versus bishop and 2, it could come down to white sacrifice one of the pawns, and then it's just a draw by insufficient material, I think, as was in game two. All right, bishop takes a8 then and g5. So after g5, we have bishop to d5, standing moves here. If you trade off, of course, it is just dead drawn. There's nothing you can do here. H6 or f6 doesn't matter. King h1, and you're just gonna dance around, preventing the black king from it coming in into white's camp. So you just dance your rook around the fifth even. That's dead drawn. But here we see bishop to f5, Gukesh refusing to trade, rook to c1 then. He thinks that he's probably rook to 7 and putting pressure there, but then again rook g6 just stops all that. King to g7, rook to c7, bishop to g6, yes, as happens. Rook to c5, c4, asking Gukesh if you trade. And if Gukesh trades, yeah, it's just dead drawn, right? Can't make any progress. But Gukesh says no. I'm going rook to b1, check, king to g2, and rook to e1. So Gukesh probing a bit, trying to put some pressure on you. Rook to b4 and h5. So Gukesh going for this idea that we discussed earlier of perhaps h4 takes and trying to create some sort of a passer on the h. So rook to a4, and we have rook to e4, putting pressure on the bishop. Ding just drops the bishop back to f3. Perfectly fine. You could even go here for this, right? And you're just arguing, okay, I'm putting more pressure on. But then this isn't really possible anymore. You just capture. But this does look a bit annoying. But this is not played then. King h6 is played. King to g1. Rook to e6. And rook to c4. Here we can see players have reached time control. Gukesh had over an hour with the additional 30 minutes granted. And things already now starting to burn time again now. When he's under under 40 minutes. Around 42, 43. So now we have this g4 and Ding goes rook 2. Bishop to d5 attacking the rook. Rook to d6, bishop to b7, and now king to g5. So the king is making some progress. I mean, it was in g8, h7, h6, and now to g5, trying to get in. Ideally, if the king could end up on h3 or f3, that would be a dream for Gukesh. But that's not really possible right now, as the rook at this moment in time is constricting the king from entering. Again, this is perhaps an idea that Gukesh is trying to go for, play for. So we have f3 now. Personally, I would not advocate for this. If we're playing in this position of pawn down in this endgame, try and keep it on and keep your fortress, your structure as firm as possible. Think of it as if you as if this is your house, right? Although this is not a losing move at all, it is sort of giving a breakaway to open up a bit that could lead to future mistakes. So I'll just go bishop g2 here and keep it solid, and the game continues. But f3 is played, which is logical as well because you want to trade off more pawns. And the more pawns you trade off here, obviously it leads to a draw. So we have f5 then by Gukesh. Uh, f takes on g, h takes on g, and rook to b4. Bishop to f7 then, king to f2, rook to d2 check, and king to g1. Now this is what I was discussing earlier. This f3 push has now allowed Gukesh to get his rook to d2 and constrain and constrict Ding's king from ever going to the second rank. It's staying on the first rank now, and we'll see how this becomes a problem. King to f6 then. Oh, this is objectively drawn, of course. It's not as if this losing the way things playing this, but it is questionable, risky a bit, right? Okay, king to back to g5 and rook to b4. We have bishop to e6 and rook to a4. Rook to b2 and bishop to a8. We have king to f6, rook to f4, king to f5, and here Ding makes the final mistake, rook to f2. And the winning move here that Gukesh finds, and he found it instantly, and in this moment he couldn't believe it. His hands were starting to tremble. Is rook takes f2 check, followed by king takes f2. And the reason why this is winning now is because of bishop to d5. It's a forced line. Bishops will be traded off. This bishop can't go anywhere else. For instance, there, it can't move. It has to be on this diagonal. If the bishop was on b7, for example, any other square besides a8 after this move, if it maybe moved to, let's say, even to c6, and then after this happened, um, let's say here, or let's say here to d2, here, and now let's say back, let's say to b2, let's say to b2, and now here. This is drawn because now the king is not on the e-file. Wait, let's go back a few moves to get this analysis proper because it's very important we do it properly here. Here, 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 here. Let's say the bishop was on c6 here, right? And the rook plays here, and white goes rook f2 now. Now it's a perfect draw because takes, and the bishop maybe comes to d5. That's not a problem. You do not capture because then you're in a lost pawn endgame, right? Because of king e3, king e5, king d3, and you're just coming in, right? No, no, not there. You gain opposition. Yeah, yeah. And now king e4, king f2, king d3. You're outflanking the king f1, king to e3, king g2, and the game continues like that. And eventually, this would be lost. So the reason why it's so important here, if we go back to this setup, let's go back a few moves. Takes. You can simply just move your bishop anywhere here. You can go to b5. It's fine. You can go to e8. It's fine because these pawns don't advance anymore. Because there, if you do this, you'll see that, okay, king d4, trying to exert pressure, bishop to c2. And it comes back to what we discussed earlier, where white would even end up giving up one of the pawns um, for the draw. Obviously, you do not capture again, you just keep moving. And the problem is, if f4 comes, it's on a dark square, so it's fine, because if this happens, If black has to do that, it's perfectly fine. That happens, and let's just draw, right? And now we have bishop takes g4, and it's a draw to insufficient material. But because this bishop was on a8, if we go back after rook to b2 threatening it, and king to f6 and rook to f4 after king to e5. The rook didn't even have to move. That's the other thing. You could have easily just went bishop back to g2 or to c6 here. So bishop to c6, you're still fine. It's perfect drawn. Not to h1 because there's more complications on the that could occur here after rook b1, king h2, and bishop to b3. Although this is much more, it's not as straightforward this win, but it is eventually it is lost, right? You couldn't really do that because of bishop to c2. There's threats there, rook to f4, and now simply rook to d1. If you go here, of course, you are lost. So that's the problem. You start losing squares to move around. Bishop to g2, same story. Bishop to e4, and you cannot go to f1. You would be forced. It's a similar sequence that you'd be forced on this diagonal. And because of the activity of the king and the rook here in the setup, let's say a white played here. Okay, if you trade here again, it's back to drawish territory. But the thing is, because of activity of the king, it's coming in. And that's the problem. King to b2, see there? King to rook to b2 after, and then king to e3. Um, if you go here again now to try and hold on, doesn't work because of this, and now rook to f1. The next move is rook to f2 because the king is close enough to exert this trade again. The king can't move anywhere, so the rook must move. Let's say rook to a2. Now we simply have rook to f2, and this is forced. And it's coming with opposition. The king will go back to h1, and you just pick up the f pawn, and that's GG's. So this is why it's important if Ding had placed the rook on anywhere other than a8 here. But then, even this move in itself, rook 8, bishop 8 is not a mistake. The critical mistake here is rook f2, which in itself is also not a critical mistake, but because of where the bishop is placed, that's what makes the mistake critical, because of the forced exchanges that happens afterwards, and because in this setup, black has 2 versus 1 pawns, and black's king is so advanced. Even without the pieces here and the king on h8 even, it is winning for black if it was just 1 versus 2 and the setup was like that. Okay. But after that, we had rook to f2 takes, and here a forced exchange happened, and not too many moves later, after gaining the opposition, it was in this position on move 58 that Ding Liren resigned, and it was the first time Ding Gukesh has beaten Ding with the black pieces in his whole career so far. And with that, Gukesh Damaraju became the 18th world chess champion, undisputed. And he's only 18 years old, 18 at 18. So yeah, dreams do come true, and when they do, it's a beautiful thing. Tuning in and for being with me during this coverage of the World Chess Championships. We'll be continuing more coverage on different tournaments and also introducing tutorials and themes on how to approach the different phases of the game going forward in the coming weeks. So again, I appreciate all your time that you've invested in watching this coverage and with me, doing this coverage with me, and all the love you've given. And yeah, this is just the beginning. Many congratulations and commiserations to the new champion, Gukesh Tamaraju. What a feat! Only 18, and also major respect to Ding, one of my favorite players. He put up a great fight. Despite not being in the best form, he still showed up and put his best foot forward. I mean, after game 12, the scores were tied. He bounced back, playing probably one of the best games in his career. So props to the champion, former champion as well. But this is just the beginning of an exciting journey for the young man, and all eyes are on him, seeing how he'll perform in for incoming tournaments. And we are excited as the chess community and fraternity for what's to come for both of these players. So yeah, Thanks for tuning in, guys. And if you like the content, please do consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. More fun content coming up very soon. Take care.